What's going on, everybody? I love these Monday videos where I share your responses to my previous week's question. And it's fun to hear from you. It's fun to hear the stories. It's fun to hear the experiences, the opinions, because this community is really about sharing the joy of the hobby. But one of the things that's really fun to hear about, and is like one of the most enjoyable things to hear, are stories of experiences that other people have had. Hearing the story of somebody making a big purchase or making a big sale, or the card that they bought that they always wanted and how they found it and how that all played out. Like, those stories are epic. And you all came through with some really good stories about the most memorable deal or acquisition or transaction in regards to cards. Like, some really, really awesome stories. And I have some thoughts for sure about what some of you experienced and went through. I recently shared the story of how I acquired my 84 Fleer Clemens update rookie card, right? Extended rookie card, extra rookie card, whatever you want to call it, by attending a card show, winning a raffle, using the raffle prize to buy the card, which I otherwise never would have been able to afford. I've shared the story about the time I bought a Dale Murphy Upper Deck reverse negative card. You guys know the card, for a quarter, before people really knew what the card was and that it was an error or a variation card. And I ended up selling it for $100. I've shared the story about how my dad bought a Joe Montana rookie card for about $20 way back in the day. Got the card graded. It came back a 9. Looked it over, held on to it for years and was like, man, this is better than a 9. Resubmitted it to PSA and it got a 10. So what did he do? He said, a 10, somebody else values a 10 more than I value a 10. So he sold it for over $10,000 and went out and bought a really nice 7. Those stories are epic. And some of the stories are important because they're amazing memories. Some of them are about big wins. Some of them that you shared were about big losses. Some of them were just important moments in your life. And I'm super excited to go through these with you. At the end of the day, these cards are just cards. And, when we're nearing the end of our time here on Earth, and we're at the very last moments of our lives, the things that will matter most to us are not going to be earthly possessions. I really believe that the things that will matter most to us are the memories that we made and the people that we shared those memories with. It's about the experiences that we have with family members. It's about the friends that we've made along the way, about the connections that we've made, and about our memory living on through those people. And that's kind of what this is. Memories are really what it's all about, even more than the cards. And though these stories I'm about to share with you are about cards, buying them, selling them, trading for them, whatever the story is, it's really a memory that stuck with each of us for some reason. And that reason is because it was important to us and it was something that made an impression on us. And I appreciate all of you that shared. As usual, I am not going to share all of them. I'm going to share a lot of them, but not every single one. Although every single one was super cool. Let's take a look at the first series of responses. Sometimes deals are just amazing, and that's part of what makes the memory so great.
This first comment says, my answer to this week's question, I have two fond memories, one purchase and one trade, that both went down in 7th grade study hall. Mr. Cassidy, a cool teacher, he totally reminds me of you. I will start with my best purchase ever. I bought a complete 1976 Topps football set for $25. I've recently started getting cards from this set graded, and they are grading 7s and 8s. Score. My best trade ever? I traded an 87 Classic baseball Bo Jackson Auburn jersey football baseball card for a binder with over 200 1952 and 1953 Topps cards in it. No Mantle or Maze in it, but some star cards, and I still have all of them. When I got back into collecting a couple years ago, I found that Bo Jackson card and bought it for $18. The best study hall ever. Thanks, Bill Tracy and Eric Shingshang. Great video, Greg. People have had some great years. My story for next week? I bought the most as a kid between 1980 and 1983. In 1981, I pulled a Joe Montana rookie card. I still have it. I like to remember I have an iconic card I got for just 30 cents. The price of a pack back then. I wish I collected basketball cards in 1986. I got my Jerry Rice rookie card in a pack also.
These were a couple of really good deals that paid off for members of this community. I mean, you traded this classic Bo Jackson card, which now isn't even worth $20, for a binder full of 52 and 53 Topps cards. I mean, that's incredible. And the thing that is just, I think, is so funny about that story is those are the sorts of things that are still happening. You know, so many of us talk about it's all about vintage, and people talk about nobody cares about the players of the past. People only care about the players who are on TV right now. You know, that's the thing that modern collectors are always saying is nobody cares about those guys that played, 75 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. They care about the people that when they turn on the TV, they see them. They care about Patrick Mahomes. They care about LeBron James. They care about Aaron Judge and Shohei. That's the future because those guys that are gone are gone. And you know what? In the 80s and early 90s, you know what people were talking about? They were talking about Jose Canseco. They're talking about Bo Jackson, right? And those cards were selling for crazy amounts. They're talking about Mark McGuire, right? They were talking about all of these phenoms. You know, Dominique Wilkins was leading the league in scoring with 30 points. Now, are there some people that are playing right now that are once in a generation talents? Yes. That are legends? Yes. But there are also the guys who are not going to have that legendary status. And I believe that the two best athletes, if you're just talking athlete, that ever participated in sport, I lean toward Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. Now, Michael Jordan was a phenomenal athlete as well, obviously. You know, Wayne Gretzky, Babe Ruth. You can go through these guys of who are the best athletes. But those two guys were like freakish phenoms in two sports at the highest level. And I get the hype. But just like was happening then is happening now with the amount of production, with the hype around them building these players up to levels that are not going to be likely to be achievable. And you traded them for a bunch of 52 and 53 Topps. And it even said, including some Hall of Famers. That's fantastic. And then the other comment talking about the pack that was opened that had a Montana rookie card. and opening a pack that had a Jerry Rice rookie card. You know, there is something so special about opening packs. You know, I have the world's worst luck with packs. I'm 100% convinced about it. And I've talked for a long, long time about how I have no luck. And I was really thinking about it, about hearing this of opening, you know, some packs and pulling out that Montana and saying, well, you know, it was 30 cents for the pack, and that's what I paid for the Montana. And I really thought, what is truly, what is the best card I've ever pulled from a pack? Ever. And I actually remembered what it is. I actually remembered what the card was. So there was, I think it was Stadium Club cards. Back in, was it the early 90s? They had a thing where you could pull a team card from a pack. And if you pulled the team card and then that team made the playoffs, you got it was like a redemption. And then if they made the Super Bowl and were like the NFC or AFC champs, there was a redemption. And then if they were the Super Bowl winner, there was some sort of redemption. And the biggest redemption was if that team won the Super Bowl. And I actually pulled a pack of that and got one of those redemptions, and the team card that I got was the Buffalo Bills. And this is when the Buffalo Bills were really good, going to Super Bowl year after year after year. So in that dead week before the Super Bowl, after the AFC and NFC championship game, I took the card down to the local card shop and I put it on commission, and I sold it. I sold it for $100. And that's actually the best card I've ever pulled, because I got $100 for the card I pulled from a pack. But you know what? It's not a Montana rookie card, and it's not a Jerry Rice rookie card. But that nostalgia and that excitement, that the way that you get a little bit extra pumps out of your heart when you're ripping a pack open about what might be in there is certainly something special. And I sure wish I could say that I pulled a Jerry Rice rookie or a Joe Montana rookie, but I can't.
Sometimes learning experience are the biggest takeaway from our biggest and greatest memories of our card collecting. This one says, my one memory, purchasing a 1992 NBA Hoops Supreme Court Michael Jordan for $20 at a card show. I bought this back in 1993, and $20 was a lot. I was a 10-year-old kid at the time, and I really liked the card. I rushed into purchasing it and overpaid. When I look back, I do feel I was pressured and taken advantage of by the vendor. I still have this card to this day. The card is a reminder to be careful, take my time, and be fair, especially to kids at card shows. The card reminds me of my childhood, with lessons learned. I love it. And a great one from my friend Dawn, which says, Greg, thanks for the mention in this video, and yes, you were right. The friendship with you in Orlando is priceless. I'm proud to be able to call you both friends of mine. As for this question, I got a good one for you. Hope you all get a laugh out of this. I made a terrible mistake early in life and went 1 year of college and left to get married. The marriage didn't even last a year. The split ended up leaving me in debt and took me 10 years to financially fully recover from. During the 10-year span, in the mid-'80s, I still tried to collect when I could. Then around 1988, a good friend was a card dealer and had a big shop that also sold coins, gold, and silver. He just got in a nice Jim Brown rookie he knew I would really want, probably couldn't afford. To make a long story short, I traded my old wedding ring for the Jim Brown. Then in '94 at the National, I had it graded at the show. It came back a PSA 7 OC. For personal reasons, it will always be a coveted card in my collection and an example of turning a negative situation into a positive.
Oh man, I love these two responses, and one of the reasons I like these two responses so much is because it's taking kind of an unfortunate thing that happened and turning it into a positive thing. You know, one of my favorite parts about this hobby, and one of the reasons I think it's such a great hobby for young people, for kids to get into. One of the reasons I would encourage people to try to get your kids or your grandkids involved in cards is because so many life lessons can be learned through this hobby. You can learn entrepreneurship, you can learn investing, you can learn taking care of things, you can learn nice things are better than things that aren't as nice, you can learn patience, you can learn social skills, you can learn so many different things, and you can learn life lessons, right? You can learn life lessons, and these two examples are perfect about some life lessons. It's like, not everyone's going to be an amazing athlete, but playing sports as a kid is a really good thing to do because of the life lessons that you learned. The more you practice, the better you get. The more you work at something, the more you'll see improvement, right? Working with others and not just simply relying on yourself, but knowing that you have a part in a bigger picture. And these are all things that you learn through sports, just like there are things that cards teach us and takeaways that we can have as a result of card collecting. Don's move of trading his wedding ring for a Jim Brown rookie card, man, that is an epic move, my friend. That is absolutely epic. If you don't know my friend Don, this guy's got an absolutely incredible vintage football card collection. And the fact that the Jim Brown in his collection came from that, I mean, that is just outstanding. But the thing about cards is that it, again, just like I said in the opening, it's not just about the card. It's not. It's about so much more than the card. And the memories and the life lessons and the when we think back and go, what is the most memorable deal that I've ever made having to do with cards? And it might be a bad one. It might be a bad deal that we made, but that now from that we say, this is actually a learning opportunity. I sold the Jerry Rice cards for too cheap. I was just trying to dump them so I could go get the video game. And now I learned that my regret from that is, the takeaway is, patience is something that I need to be better at. Cards do so much more than just give us something to look at.
Sometimes it's that a card is more meaningful than valuable, with a few great stories here. First off, this one says, "Hi, Greg. The most memorable card I have in my collection was a Christmas present from my wife. There was a nice baseball card store next town over from where I used to work. He had a binder filled with T205s and T206s. I would take my long way home from work maybe once a month and pick up a T205 from my set I was building. It was early December on a weekend, and my wife was with me, and we were in the area. So I asked if we could stop at the card shop, and she could pick out a card as my Christmas present. I showed her the binder of T205s and picked out 3 cards I needed. I told her to buy one and give it to me for Christmas. I had no idea which one she would select, so it would be a surprise. These were common players, and I don't even remember who they were. Meanwhile, I showed her other more expensive cards in the binder, including an absolutely beautiful T205 Cy Young. Now, this was a player she recognized the name. I went back to the car, and she and the dealer made the transaction, not to see the card again until Christmas. Come Christmas, I opened up her present, and there was a T205 common player card I needed for the set. I was very happy. After we opened all our presents, she went and said she had one more, but it's heavy and still in the other room. So I went and got it and brought this heavy present back to the living room to open. I unwrapped the wrapping, and it was a small fireproof safe. She said I should store my best cards in it. I pulled it out of the cardboard box, unlocked it with the key, and opened it. To my surprise, there was that T205 Cy Young in the safe staring back at me. I was totally surprised, and it is this card that will carry that special meaning to me. And my good friend Shane says, I love that your dad is smashing his way through the best cards of the 50s. So cool. My favorite memory related to acquiring or trading a card would be getting a 1950 Bowman Maurice McDermott at a local antique store with my dad when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. It wasn't more than a $5 expense and is probably still worth less than $5 today. But holding a card that old in my hand at that age was a big spark that ignited my interest in the hobby that remains to this day, almost 40 years later. I still remember us laughing on the ride home about the fact that we refer to Maury as String Bean on the back of the card. Something my dad and I will still occasionally laugh about all these years later. This next one says, Hey Greg, the memory that stands out today is one I thought about this week as I was doing a quick video on 80s football cards. I collected most of the late 80s Topps football sets card by card, pack by pack, and then would find singles I needed at swap meets and the LCS. I found my original 1986 Topps football checklist card number 394 that I had used to mark off with pen each time I found a card for the set. I was a Bears fan, and my last card I needed to complete the 86 Topps football set was the Jim McMahon base card. And when I pulled out that original checklist card, I found that the McMahon box had been not checked off. It was still blank. I know I found that card at my LCS, and maybe after finding it and putting in my pages in my 3-ring binder, I just forgot to make that one last mark like I had all the others because I was excited to have finished off the set. It's funny how things like that stick with you. My best pickup for me this year is a Johnny Blatnick rookie card. In the hobby, he is a nobody, played a couple years in the late 40s, but he was a local gentleman I never knew he played. What I am trying to say is that if I had never found your videos, I never would have researched and got his card and remember his contribution to my area in baseball. Not that impressive monetarily, but any exhibit card I pick up, for the set I started from my dad's 50 cards he had from his youth that I inherited after his passing, makes my day anytime I find a card, common or star, to add to the set. Looking to find a few more by the end of the year.
You know, I've always known cards were more than just cards. I've always known that. Deep in my mind, I feel like I'm a fairly practical person. So, of course, I'm like, at the end of the day, they're cards, right? But until you have some moments that really are so meaningful that it's a direct time that you can say, see, it is more than a card. It's just like the Ernie Banks rookie card that I got at the National. It's so much more than an Ernie Banks rookie card because of who I was with. Because of who I was with, that moment makes that card a card that is worth so much more to me than that card could ever mean to anybody else. Because that's the card that I bought with all of these people by my side. The memories of this, whether it's, finishing the set of the cards you inherited from your dad, that's amazing. That's carrying on a legacy. That's That's accepting the torch and continuing to go with it and completing something that a loved one started, or the card that you never checked off of your checklist because you were so excited when you actually got that last card. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of, in the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where he's on the island, he becomes best friends with the volleyball, right? And the thing about that, the thing that kept him going, if you remember the movie, the thing that kept him going is he was a FedEx guy. And he was in a FedEx cargo plane. And there was a piece of mail that when he ends up on the island, there's a piece of mail there. And the thing that kept him going and the thing that he brought with him the whole time was that piece of mail that he had to finish the job for that. That was part of what kept him going. Well, the fact that you've got a checklist that you've had for decades and you actually finished it, but now get to finally cross out the last box on the checklist. Like, how cool? I mean, that card, when you talk about a card telling a story, that card tells a story. My good pal Mookie Chilson, he absolutely loves being this forensic scientist on cards and trying to figure out what the story is. One of the reasons he loves those pinhole cards is because the pinhole proves that somebody loved and adored that card. And if there are multiple pinholes, that means that person took it down multiple times and still loved it so much they put it back up. And if there are, creases under the pinhole, depending on where the creases are, it can show how many times they turned it and pulled it away from the wall to look at it because they adored it. And a card that was adored is a card that was loved and was a treasured item and has a story. We all wonder, and part of the beauty of these vintage cards that we collect is not just that they're old pictures, right? They're not just old pictures of cardboard of athletes or whoever it is you collect, historical figures, whatever it is. It's the story associated with it, right? It's the story associated with that card. How did this card, somebody opened a pack decades ago, and this came out of the pack. And maybe it went into a box. Maybe it went into a book. Maybe it went into a sock drawer. And then somebody moved and they took it with them and they didn't throw it away. And then that person had it and left it, and then a family member ended up with it. And then the family member didn't know what it was worth, so they took it and they sold it. And then that person graded it or whatever it is. The story, we always talk about if these walls could talk, right? Oh, the stories that I was at a park at Lucy's soccer game the other day at a very old part of Sacramento, like one of the oldest parts of Sacramento. And it has some massively old trees surrounding the park. And I was sitting there at the game and I was looking at these trees. I mean, they're hundreds of years old. And I'm like, man, I bet these trees could tell a story of what has happened here before. And that's kind of the thing about cards, is there are these artifacts. And an artifact has a story, not only that it survived, but why did it survive? How did it survive? How did it end up with me? And that's part of the beauty, for me, of vintage cards. That's part of the appeal of a vintage card. I'll go into a bookstore and a brand new book, that's cool. A brand new book is cool. And my daughter Molly loves to read books. She reads 30, 40 books a year. And when I'm talking a book, there are these like 5, 6, 700 page books she loves. That's her favorite thing to do. But when I go into like an old bookstore and you see an old copy of an old book and it's got like that smell of like must, and that to me is something extra special that I appreciate. And it's part of the romantic part of cards. And I absolutely love it. And that's what a lot of these stories share.
Sometimes what's memorable are the deals that maybe didn't go so well. And we've got a couple of those too. This first one says, "Hey Greg, great video again. As a kid, I had several big deals I think about. Most were bad, a couple good. One particular deal was quite memorable and bad. My cousin somehow had a page of Jerry Rice rookies. He traded them to me for a few Griffies. This was about 91. I took my binder with the Rice rookies to our local shop. I tried to sell some of them to the owner for video game money. He didn't bite on any. Beckett was $35, I think. Most of them were probably around a 4 or 5 grade. Two older dudes in the shop overheard and asked to buy them. I wanted to keep one, so I sold 8 for a total of $28. The owner said I made out due to the condition, but looking back, I think I got screwed royally." A second one says, "My most vivid card memory? From my paternal grandmother's family, I got a head of extremely fine and straight hair. It was hard to manage, wouldn't do anything, and usually looked like I just got out of bed. My mom attempted to bribe me $30 one summer between middle school grades to try a perm wave thing. I was like, no way, Mom. Then one day soon after, a 1972 Top Steve Garvey showed up at the local card dealer. This was in the early to mid 80s, so this high number series card was a rare thing then, and the going rate for a decent copy was about $30. The short of it is that I filled the big hole in my Steve Garvey player run at the expense of looking like one of the Brady boys in the final season of the Brady Bunch. 40 years later, I still have the card, but only about 60% of the hair, which is fine and straight again." And another says, "Back when I was in elementary school, I traded an 84-star Michael Jordan for a Nintendo Game Boy that came with 3 games. This was the first year for the Game Boy, and it was all the hype at the time. Man, that didn't age well. But as a kid, that Game Boy was something my parents would never have spent $100 to purchase for me. So I figured out a way to get it myself."
Oh man, there's a certain level of pain when I read the Game Boy for the Star Jordan story. I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping it wasn't the Star Jordan, the 101, the really expensive one. It probably was. It's rough. I made some trades in my time that were great trades, and I've made some trades that were bad trades. I remember trading an 89 Topps Walt Weiss for an 83 Fleer Ryan Sandberg rookie. And at the time, that was a really good deal. And at the time, the Star Jordan for the Game Boy was probably a pretty even trade. I think that the way things have turned out, but you have to focus on the joy that you got from the Game Boy, right? The Game Boy probably brought you hours and hours and hours of joy. And the Jordan would have just sat there. And yes, the Jordan's worth a lot of money now. And sure, there were some Jerry Rice rookies that maybe got sold too early. Sure. But maybe what you ended up buying with it was fantastic as well, right? It's one of those things where it's not the best deal that we got to focus on or the worst deal that we've got to focus on. It's your average deal. And you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And some of these ones hurt a little bit. But as a whole, as long as you aren't burned continuously, and there are a lot of wins in the win column as well. It's like that game, remember that game War, where you have like half a deck of cards and they have half a deck of cards, and you turn the cards over and you see who gets the higher card, and the person with the higher card gets both cards, and then they go into their pile. Like, you're not going to win every single heads up in the game of War. The key is, did you win the game? And if you came out ahead overall, then that's the key. And you know what? Sometimes, going back to what I said earlier, you may even come out behind. You might even come out behind on the value of the cards as a whole. The sum of all of your trades, the sum of all of your deals, you may be behind. But again, the memories that you make and the lessons that you had and the experiences that you experienced along the way might make it where it still was a fantastic deal in your behalf.
And the last category is sometimes a memory is what actually ignited the passion that we have in the hobby. This first one says, "Hi Greg, thanks for considering my response for your video. For the question, what is the one memory of a card that you acquired that is the one that you think about the most?" Well, the one that came immediately to mind is my 1956 Mantle PSA 2 that I got in 2023 at the very first card show of my life, the Front Row show in Pasadena, California. At this point, I had just recently returned to the hobby and had not known any collectors besides the childhood friends I lost contact with decades ago. When I walked into the room, needless to say, I felt completely overwhelmed. I brought my childhood cards and some others I had inherited and felt extremely excited to connect with so many people in the hobby. It met all of my expectations and then some. I was hooked again. I stopped at a random table and my eyes immediately widened at the expansive showcase. Mantles, Ruths, Walter Paytons, Jabbar autographs. It was jaw-dropping. I sheepishly asked the seller if he would consider a trade, thinking of course not. Why would he want my cards? To my excitement, he said, "Sure, I'll take a look." He pulled out some cards and said he was interested and asked what I would want. My eye went straight to the 56 Mantle. It was the best centered eye appeal card I could afford, but it was above about $500, the value of my cards. I asked if I could put cash on top of the trade, and he agreed, and he even lowered the price of the Mantle so I could afford it. It was so surreal. Never did I imagine I would own a Mantle, let alone his Triple Crown winning year. I was transported back to being 13 years old and excitedly told my wife of the experience and showed my daughter the card as if I had a winning lottery ticket. Fast forward, now being more immersed in the hobby community, I watched your video interviewing Ash. To my surprise and enjoyment, I recognized Ash to be the very one I got my Mantle. I now visit his table at every card show he attends. A significant memory that really jump-started me back into the hobby and a great community. Thanks again, Greg, for the pirate card, too. And lastly, this one says, "Hey, Greg, once again, a home run with the latest pickup video. When you asked the question about what card or memory was the best in the hobby, it was an easy answer for me. While walking home from school, we would stop for our baseball and hockey card packs at a local card shop owned by a gentleman named Tom. One day, while looking over the display case, there sat a 1979 Topps Wayne Gretzky rookie card with a $25 price tag on it. A huge price for a middle school kid in 1987. Tom allowed me to pay $5 a week, which was most of my allowance, until I paid it off. When I finally took that card home, I never realized the impact it would have on me for years to come. I moved to Florida after high school. The shop closed years ago, and time went on. While meeting up with friends from home when at the National in Cleveland, I found out Tom had recently passed away. Unfortunately, never got the chance to let him know the impact he would have on my hobby experience all these years later. That Gretzky card will never leave my collection. Thanks for all your great content.
These two comments, they really say so much, don't they? They talk about how these deals were real triggers in igniting a passion or reigniting a passion for a hobby that now is something that we love. And there's a few things that I want to point out here, one of which is, in both cases, the cards that were acquired were a stretch. They weren't really affordable, right? The Gretzky took weeks of going and paying the debt. The card was on layaway, but it was important enough that it was worth the patience, that it was worth spending that large sum of money at the time. The Mantle, the 56 Mantle, didn't have quite enough to trade, so was willing to put cash on top. Didn't quite have enough cash on top, had to negotiate down the price to make it work. Sometimes we're afraid to step up a little bit and acquire a card that is a little bit out of our normal budgetary purchase range. But sometimes those cards, when we sacrifice some of the little stuff, you know, if you're paying $5 a week, which he said was the majority of his allowance, for several weeks to get the card, if you're trading a bunch of cards from your old collection, plus all the cash you brought with you to get the Mantle, you're basically saying in both these other cases, in both of these situations, I'm not going to be able to get anything else for a while. I'm going all in right now for that card. And sometimes those are the cards that mean the most to us. Sometimes I think we get bored and we get impatient. And so what we do is we buy some stuff that, do we really like it? Do we really want that card? Where it's the card we really want, we never actually save up enough to get to it because we're so distracted by all these other cards along the way. And sometimes the most meaningful card is the card that we really had to stretch for. Now, that's not always the case. We have examples earlier about, a meaningful card was a card from a guy who lives in my local town. And a guy who just did a lot for the local community with baseball. Or the card that I got of a player that named String Bean, or nicknamed String Bean on the back of the card. But it was memorable because of who I got it with and how it helped ignite my interest in the hobby. So sometimes the card that's a little bit of a stretch financially is a little bit more meaningful. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a stretch at all. Sometimes it could be a cheap card because of the meaning behind it. The bottom line is this hobby does so much more than just create clutter in some place in our house where we store these things. It's about finishing the collection or the set that our parent who's passed on started. It's about who I bought the card with and the inside joke with our parent for years and years and years about that card. It's about the person who you got the card from. It's about how you acquired the card. It's about who you were with when you got the card and that memory lives on. It could be about the lessons that were learned from the card that was purchased. or sold, maybe too early or maybe too late. But the hobby of cards, and I'll continue to say this, is more than about cards. When I go and I say to somebody and they say, hey, what'd you do this weekend? I go, I went to a baseball card show, and they look at me like I have a third eye on my forehead. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a big dork about these baseball cards. I freaking love them. I absolutely love them. And they think that I'm a giant nerd, which I am. And I'm okay with that because I know it's more than just the cards. It's more than just the cards. And I've talked a lot about the relationships and a lot about the friendships. But again, at the end of the day, the memories that we make and the memories that we share with people we care about, that is one of the best fallouts. That is one of the best results of the hobby, besides just a bunch of cards. It really is a hobby that is special, and it's special because of all of the things that you all shared today. Now, for this week's question, let me go ahead and share with you what I'm interested in. My friend Dylan, Double D Vintage Cards, I'm on a text group with him, and he's a great guy, and he has so much passion and joy for the hobby. And he texted something, and he just said it kind of off the cuff, but he said, what does it even mean to comp a vintage card anymore? Like, how do you even comp a vintage card? Vintage cards have so many different components to them that no two are alike. Comping a vintage card, that's not even possible. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good point. And John Mangini was on there, and he was like, that's a really good point. That's so true. How do you comp a card when no two cards are identical? Now, two cards that come out of a pack of Flawless today are pretty much identical. You can comp them because it's pretty much side by side the same thing. They go out of the pack, they go into plastic, they go to PSA, they get graded, they get the same grade, they look side by side to be identical. Those are the same thing. That you can actually use other sales to comp. But how do you comp two cards when no two cards are really the same? So my question is this. When it comes to vintage cards, is finding a comp even possible? Is it a waste of time? And if it isn't a waste of time and it is possible, what's the best way to do it? I immediately sent a text to Dylan and John Mangini, and I said, we should do like a video on this and just talk about what does it even mean to comp vintage cards? And they're like, that sounds fun. So I'm hoping we do that. But I think it's a really good question, and I think it's a much deeper question than we might initially give it credit for. Can we really comp vintage cards? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'm curious to share your thoughts, and I'm curious to share my thoughts on your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I look forward to it.